That afternoon, I nervously reviewed the notes I had taken during lunch. I hoped I was doing the right thing. Then I remembered Frank's teasing and Melanie's cold declaration that she was leaving and decided to go for it. I dialed the number Jerry had given me, and a pleasant male voice answered. "Hello, can I help you?" "Yes, I would like to speak to Mr. Henry Miller," I said as I was instructed. "This is Mr. Miller," the voice replied. "What are you looking for?" "Something from Grove Press," was my reply. "Please give me your name, sir." I considered using an alias, but Jerry was very unequivocal about the need to identify myself accurately. "They're always worried about the police prostitution squad," he told me. "They'll go to great lengths to make sure you're not a cop trying to set them up." I told him my real name. "Are you calling from the office?" Mr. Miller asked. "Yes," I replied, "but this is a personal matter. It has nothing to do with my company." "I understand, sir. Now, could you give me the number of the switchboard through which you work?" "Of course," I said, "but wouldn't you prefer to use my direct line instead?" "No," he replied. "I'll call the main number and ask for you, and then we can get on with your case." Pretty smart, I thought to myself. If he calls and the operator answers, he'll realize he's calling a real company, not a police station. And if that person transfers his call to me, then I'm really an employee of the company. It's not completely reliable, but it's pretty damn good. I gave him the number for the main switchboard, and he hung up immediately. A couple minutes later, my phone rang. The operator transferred the call to me. It was Mr. Miller. He then asked me for my cell phone number. "This will allow us to contact you after hours if we need to," he explained. After I gave it to him, he continued. "Now that we have gone through the identification process," he said calmly, "please tell me how our service can help you. I'm looking for a very special companion who may be available for a series of events that could stretch over a month or more." Said the voice. "That's a little unusual. We don't normally commit to such a long period of time. We may be able to help you, but it will be expensive." He gave me a price that made my eyes water. I swallowed. "That's fine with me, Mr. Miller." "Well, do you have any special requirements?" "Yes," I said. "She has to look like a goddess." He grinned. "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, sir, but I think you'll be able to find a companion to suit your needs." He paused. "Do you have a pen handy?" When I assured him that I did, he gave me their website address. I noticed that the URL address started with HTTPS, indicating a secure server. When I was done, he said to my surprise that when I was prompted for a username for me to enter Anais Nin. He then gave me a numeric password. "Please understand, sir, that both the username and password will change as soon as you make a selection. This is for both our and your own safety." When I confirmed my understanding, he continued. "Now, regarding payment, sir, once you have made your selection and the girl is scheduled to meet with you, your credit card will be charged the amount you just agreed to. In addition, our clients are expected to show their appreciation directly to their companions. If you are comfortable with this, we recommend a 25% tip." I did a quick calculation in my mind. It had better work, I thought, or I'll both go broke and remain humiliated. "Very good, sir. When you are ready to make your choice, go to our website. You can do the rest there. Good day, sir." After that, the line cut off. I waited until I got home that evening to access the website Henry had given me. The home screen was labeled Capricorn Services, with the slogan, "Satisfying the needs of the most discerning customers." The username and password given to me, NEPGU, led me to the site, and a window opened that could have come straight from the pages of a Victoria's Secret catalog. All the women represented there were so gorgeous that I wondered why they weren't in the modeling business instead of escorting. In fact, I even wondered if the images could have been copied from some modeling agency website as part of some bait and switch. But my buddy Jerry insisted that Capricorn existed in reality, so I decided to take a chance. I assumed I'd target a blonde, but a photo of a woman with shoulder-length dark hair caught my eye, and I impulsively clicked Rhiannon. The confirmation that appeared on my screen assured me that Rhiannon would contact me within 24 hours to arrange our meeting. I was then asked to enter my credit card information. After the card number and expiration date were verified, the screen went dark, and I was suddenly thrown off the site. Out of curiosity, I tried to go back to the Capricorn site, but this time the welcome screen did not recognize my username and password, and after a second attempt, I was thrown back to my home page. I was very impressed with the security their system utilized and decided this was an encouraging sign. If they were going to that much trouble, perhaps their service was as good as Jerry pointed out. The next day, I sat there like a needle waiting for Rhiannon to call. At one point, I even considered pulling out of the deal. Putting my little plan into action was expected to be very expensive, and there were no guarantees of success. But when I went into the break room to pour myself a cup of coffee, the two secretaries chatting there immediately shut up at my appearance and turned away from me. It didn't take a genius to realize who they were talking about. The pain of being the subject of office gossip strengthened my resolve. Whatever happened, I wasn't going to continue to be a helpless victim if I could do anything about it. It wasn't until after dinner that my cell phone rang, and when I answered, a melodious voice said, "Hi, Michael. It's Rhiannon. I'm looking forward to meeting you." I swallowed and then answered, suggesting we meet for dinner to discuss my request. When she agreed, I suggested the same grill that Jerry and I had eaten at. It was small, dark, and far enough away from Eden Point that I was unlikely to run into any of my neighbors. She laughed. "How interesting. I don't think I've ever had the pleasure of dining here before. I look forward to meeting you." At that, she hung up the phone. Let's go, I thought. The grill wasn't very busy on weekdays, which was one of the reasons I'd chosen it, and the low lighting also suited my purposes. But when she walked through the door, it was as if a spotlight had illuminated her. She saw me stand up nervously, walked over, and shook my hand confidently. "Hi, Michael," she said in a musical voice. "It's nice to meet you in person." She sat down and I followed her. I must have been staring at her because she laughed and said, "Well, how do I look? We've all seen movie stars on the big screen or models in magazines. They are gorgeous, but not real. But now I've met one in person and the impact of it was overwhelming. The young woman sitting across from me was simply stunning. Dark eyes, high cheekbones, plump lips, the way her hair framed her face, her athletic yet feminine figure. I could go on and on, but the fact was that for a few moments all I could do was stare at her in silent admiration. She smiled and broke the silence. "I take that to mean approval," she said. "Oh, yes, I'm sorry," I mumbled, stammering. "It's just that for a moment I mean—" My voice trailed off in embarrassment. Luckily, at that moment, a waitress came over to take our orders. I don't even remember what I ordered, but Rhiannon settled on a salad of greens with added dressing. While the waitress was writing down our choices, I could tell that she too had fallen under Rhiannon's spell. She kept glancing at her until she finally burst into tears. "Aren't you an actress?" Rhiannon smiled sweetly at her. "No, I'm afraid not," she said, and the waitress left, muttering to herself. Their little exchange allowed the rational part of my brain to engage again. I looked at Rhiannon curiously. "I bet that happens to you a lot." She nodded unconsciously. "Yes, it happens quite often." "Can I ask you a question? Why aren't you doing television or modeling? Well, you know," I asked, stammering slightly at the end. "I've considered it," she admitted, "but it's a very cruel world. I may look good to you, but I'm just one of many in this world. The odds of getting there are about the same as a basketball player getting to the NBA. But in my field, I stand out. And unlike a model or actress, I didn't have to starve for years to pay my dues. I was making big money from the start. By the time my looks start to deteriorate, I'll have saved enough to live off my investment for the rest of my life. And if I'm really lucky, I'll find a rich man who wants a trophy wife, and he won't care what she used to do for a living." I couldn't help but nod. I didn't agree with the career she'd chosen, but she definitely approached it wisely. At that moment, the waitress brought our order. After serving Rhiannon, she looked at her again and said, "Are you sure you're not on TV? I'm just sure I've seen you before." Rhiannon shook her head. "I don't think so. If I had been there, I'm sure I would have remembered it." I tried to suppress a laugh as the waitress hurried away. As we began to eat, she looked at me carefully. "So, Michael, why don't you give me an idea of what you mean? Henry said that it is something extraordinary." I blushed and began to tell her my story. When I replayed my conversation with Melanie after I caught her and Frank in bed, Rhiannon looked at me sympathetically. "That was pretty insensitive," she said, and when I described Frank Calhoun and his behavior, she nodded understandingly. "I've met a lot of men of his type." She wiped her mouth gracefully and then folded her hands on the table. "So what exactly do you want to do, and how do I fit into your plan?" I spent the next 15 minutes describing what I hope to accomplish over the next month or so. When I finished, I confessed that I have serious doubts about what I'm trying to do. But I just can't sit there, unopposed and idle, and let them both put me down for nothing. And now that I've met you, I'm starting to think it might work. She smiled broadly. "What a lovely compliment," she said. Then she leaned forward across the table. "You know what? I think I'm going to like this." "Great," I said enthusiastically and reached out to shake her hand to seal the deal. She laughed and shook it firmly. "Doppelgangers," she said with a sly smile. Then she sat up and did something with her body that I didn't quite catch, and suddenly began to exude raw sexuality. I realized I was getting aroused. "Well," she said in a low, sexy voice, "now that we've concluded the business part of our meeting, can we move it to some more cozy place to relax?" My mouth was suddenly dry, and I had to take a sip of water before I could speak. "No," I said. "Tonight should just be about getting to know each other." She gave me a wry smile. "You don't find me attractive?" "Oh, hell no," I muttered. Yes, I don't. It's just that I'm trying to focus on what we're planning to do, and it would be better for me not to mess with you like this, don't you see? But I have a bonus for you." With those words, I handed her an envelope across the table. I had put some large bills in it beforehand. She accepted it solemnly, and it disappeared into her purse. Then she changed her posture again, and her sexual side seemed to recede. "I think I realize that, Michael." She tilted her head slightly to look at me. "You are a very interesting man. I think I'm going to enjoy our little adventure together." With those words, she got up and left, and I was left sitting in the office. For some reason, I felt squeezed like a lemon. What a woman, I thought. We had planned for Phase 1 of Operation Honey Trap to begin on Saturday, shortly after the lunch break. The temperature was already rising in Atlanta, and I figured there would be a big crowd at the pool at Eden Point. I was a little worried about whether Rhiannon would show up, but shortly after noon, a BMW Z4 pulled into my driveway. She came to my door with a small bag, and when I raised my eyebrows, she said, "My swimsuits." She looked around and smiled. "So this is the suburbs. Do you like it here?" I frowned. "Until recently, yes." She patted my cheek. "We're going to fix this." We split up at the club to go to the locker rooms and change into bathing suits. As we agreed, I went out first and found two chaise lounges near a table with an umbrella. Before I could get comfortable, I noticed big Frank Calhoun approaching me. "Well, Michael," he said, "I'm surprised to see you in the pool today. I thought you'd learn a lesson from a pro, trying to improve your tennis game." I knew he was trying to provoke me, but I answered dispassionately, "No, today my girlfriend and I want to enjoy the pool and get some sun." Frank wasn't going to let me off that easily. "Oh, you already have a girlfriend? I'd like to meet her." By now, our conversation had gotten the attention of people within earshot. I was fine with that. "Well, you're in luck, Frank. There she is," I said, pointing to the door of the girls' locker room. "Oh, my God." There was silence among the members as Rhiannon approached us. I expected her to be in a bikini, but to my surprise, she was wearing a one-piece swimsuit. But somehow it was much more appealing. It was made of some kind of silvery material that caught and reflected the sunlight, catching the attention of every man and woman in sight. I heard clicks and realized she was wearing stiletto-heeled shoes. They made her calves, thighs, and butt look simply amazing. As she approached us, I shifted my gaze from her feet to her costume. It looked different, and then I realized that it had to be made of the finest material I had ever seen. It completely followed every contour of her body, And when I looked closer, it was obvious that the suit was completely unlined. It looked like it had just been painted on her body. She walked over to me and took my hand, pressed her breasts against my bicep, and kissed my cheek. "Oh, that's good, honey," she murmured. "You've got a seat for us." Then she turned to Frank. "Is this your friend, Michael?" I looked at Frank, and to my delight, saw that his mouth was open as he stared at the vision before him. "Rhiannon," I said, "I want you to meet Frank. Frank, this is my girlfriend, Rhiannon." His mouth closed and he quickly held out his hand to shake it. "Welcome to Eden Point," he said rather grandly. "If there's anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask." Rhiannon smiled sweetly. "Oh, how sweet!" She turned to me and shyly asked, "Is everyone here as nice as Frank?" I dryly replied, "No, Frank is unique." She smiled at him again. "Well, thank you very much for making me feel at home." When he remained standing, she looked down with a smile. "Now you can let go of my hand." "Oh," he said, embarrassed. "Well, I must be going now. I hope I shall see you again, Rhiannon. I hope I shall see you again." With those words, he turned away awkwardly and walked back to the other side of the pool, looking over his shoulder repeatedly along the way. I glanced in that direction and saw Melanie sitting with her arms crossed. She didn't look pleased. Rhiannon and I settled back into the lounge chairs. She took my hand and pulled me closer to whisper in my ear. "I think that went well." I squeezed her hand. "You were perfect," I assured her. She smiled and gave me a quick kiss on the lips. I know she meant it as a friendly kiss, but 15 minutes later I could still feel her lips on mine. Then she stretched out in the chaise lounge face down. "Put some suntan lotion on me, Michael?" As I happily complied, I was sure I heard male moans nearby. Over the next few hours, I think everyone who was at the pool that day decided to walk past us to see my new girlfriend. I know for a fact that out of my male crew, everyone passed by, and after exchanging a few cheerful words, I decided to introduce them to Rhiannon. She was gracious with everyone, chatting easily as if they were her old friends. At one point, I leaned over and whispered in her ear, "You should have gone into politics." She only smiled and winked at me. "I'm just one step away from that job." I laughed. When it subsided, she leaned toward me again. "Who was she?" I knew exactly who she meant, and I pointed to Melanie on the other side of the pool. "Okay," she said. "Leave that to me." She put on her high-heeled shoes and walked over to Melanie's side of the pool. Bending at the waist, facing the pool, she removed her shoes from her feet and then dived gracefully into the shallow water. Upon surfacing, she tilted her head forward and then quickly threw it back so that her hair formed a graceful arc over her head, fanning the water in the air. I was thrilled. I'd seen this move before in commercials, but never in real life. It was amazing. Then in one motion, Rhiannon gracefully climbed out of the water onto the decking. As she faced Melanie, water running down her body, she reached up to flip her hair back, emphasizing her breasts. Then she slipped her shoes back on her feet, adding about 10 centimeters to her height, and walked back to where I was watching from. I reluctantly took my eyes off Rhiannon and looked at Melanie. She was looking at me angrily. She then turned and spoke sharply to Frank before grabbing her things and heading for the exit. He followed her, looking at Rhiannon over his shoulder again. She settled gracefully into the chaise lounge with her eyes closed. I could only hear her mumbling, "Mission accomplished." While we were there, one unpleasant thing happened. As we were about to leave, I looked up and saw Penny walking in my direction. Oh, crap, I thought. I totally forgot about Penny's women's team playing tonight. What am I going to tell her? "Hi, Michael, it's so good to see you again. Maybe we can get together and play some more—" She stopped abruptly as Rhiannon stood up and grabbed my hand. "Oh," Penny said in surprise. "Who's that?" This is Rhiannon, my girlfriend," I said awkwardly. Penny blinked and looked at Rhiannon in silence for a while, then held out her hand. "I'm Penny," she said. "It's nice to meet you." She turned back to me. I need to clean myself up. I'm pretty dirty after our match today. I'll see you around, Michael." Then she turned and hurried away before I could think of anything to say. "Who was that?" Rhiannon asked curiously. "It was Penny Pennington," I told her. "She's my mixed doubles partner." "Interesting," was her reply. I mentally kicked myself for not planning ahead of time what to do about Penny. I didn't want to risk revealing my plan to her, but I didn't want Penny to get the wrong idea in her head either. Damn it. Shortly after that, Rhiannon and I decided to call it a day. I felt like we had done everything we wanted to do today. I swear when we got out of the pool, the level of conversation increased noticeably. When we got back to my place, I let Rhiannon take a shower while I myself dried off and thought about the previous day. With the exception of my unexpected encounter with Penny, things had gone even better than I could have hoped. I'd shown Melanie that I wasn't going to sit around for the rest of my life quietly lamenting her desertion. More than that, I showed her that not only was she replaceable, but I had actually improved my position quite a bit. Let her suffer a little, I thought triumphantly. "So, how do you think it went?" I heard a voice behind me. I turned around and saw Rhiannon wrapped in a bath towel. "You were perfect," I replied enthusiastically. "You were everything I had hoped for and more." She did something with her fingers, and suddenly the towel slipped down her legs. "Don't you want to celebrate?" she asked shyly. For a while I stood there, unable to breathe. Everything about her was absolutely perfect. Her breasts were proudly upturned, small but perfectly proportioned to her body. There wasn't a gram of fat on her. Instead, her abdominal muscles were well developed. From there stretched, seemingly into infinity, her legs, strong and perfectly formed. I awed and realized I wasn't breathing. Gathering my strength, I walked over to her, bent down and handed her the towel she had dropped. "I'm so sorry, Rhiannon. It's just not the time." She smiled. "Okay. I was only checking." She threw the towel over her shoulders and walked away from me. Oh my God, I hadn't seen her butt before. When she returned, she was dressed and her bag was packed. I handed her a sealed envelope. "Thank you," I said fervently. "Today was exactly what I wanted." She tilted her head again in the same amused way and looked at me. "Do you want to go back to Melanie?" she asked suddenly. I flinched. "No," I said furiously. "This wasn't a one-time bad decision or a loss of control. She had deliberately thrown me away like some trash she no longer needed. I will never go back to her under any circumstances." "That's what I was thinking," she said. "But I was just wondering. Anyway, are we still seeing each other next week?" "Oh, sure," I said with a wide smile. During the week, I decided to go to the club for tennis practice. I wanted everyone to know that I was tired of hiding. "I'm glad you're back and stopped being discouraged," our men's team captain told me. My teammates greeted me with slaps on the back and winked widely. Behind me, I heard someone say, "Lucky son of a bitch." I smiled, knowing the impression Rhiannon could make. A couple days later, I returned to the courts for mixed doubles practice, but I couldn't find Penny anywhere. Our captain told me that she had called in sick. When I got home from practice, I called her back right away. "Are you okay, Penny?" I asked. "You don't sound sick." "Oh, nothing serious, probably just a little acute respiratory infection." "Can I get you anything?" I asked. "I'd love to." "No," she said sharply. "I mean, thanks, but I don't really need anything. Anyway, it would be better if you stayed away. I don't want you to catch it from me." "Okay, fine," I said hesitantly. "But if you get worse, call me right away. I'm worried about you." She made a vague promise and then said she needed to rest, so I disconnected. I didn't like that. Penny had always been so healthy and cheerful that it bothered me to think there was something wrong with her. And our little run-in at the pool last Saturday probably didn't help anything, I thought. I still felt like I couldn't tell her about my honey trap for fear of screwing up, but I just didn't want Penny to get the wrong impression. Hopefully when this is over, she'll forgive me, I thought. The next step in my plan was scheduled for the weekend. There was a club-catered dinner, and Rhiannon and I were going to be at it. When she arrived at my house, she was dressed very differently than last time. "Wow, you look like you just stepped out of the pages of a fashion magazine," I said, looking at her. She was wearing casual clothes consisting of a skirt, casual jacket, and blouse. But although it sounded casual, the fabrics, style, and accessories all screamed high fashion. She curtsied like a little girl. "Thank you, kind sir." "Actually, this was just dropped off at Nordstrom," she said. "But don't worry if the labels don't tell you anything. My main target today is ladies, and one lady in particular. Well, I can't speak for the wives, but I think you'll have a significant impact on the husbands anyway," I told her sincerely. As we pulled into the parking lot in front of the clubhouse, Rhiannon turned to me and said, "Tonight, we need to change our tactics slightly. We need to split up and socialize with people. That will allow me to do what I need to do." "Sounds good," I told her. As we walked out onto the patio where dinner was being held, I immediately realized that we were both right. Once again, most of the men just stared openly at Rhiannon walking by. The wives, on the other hand, were a little more snarky, but I heard more than one comment about Rhiannon's outfit that evening. Some of the more daring women asked her where she bought her clothes, and soon Rhiannon was happily exchanging shopping tips with them. After chatting for a bit, she and I got back together for a meal. "Did you have a good time?" I asked her quietly. "Oh, I've been very busy," she said seriously. "I've learned so much about what wives think about the situation with you, Melanie and Frank. More importantly, I've been making your ex's life lousy. I was also flirting with her fiancé quite a bit, and she didn't like it at all." I only grinned. It was obvious Rhiannon knew exactly what buttons to push. I was chatting with one of my teammates when Melanie walked by and beckoned me over. Out of curiosity, I followed her to see what she wanted. When she turned to face me, I saw that her face was flushed with anger. "Well, it looks like you didn't waste any time getting back to dating," she said irritably. "I didn't realize there was some sort of mandatory waiting period," I said sarcastically. "Yeah? I think you're totally out of your league, Michael. Where the hell did you find her? I never met her when we were married." "I met her through work," I said kindly. "Well, I'd be careful if I were you. She looks like a lot more than you can handle." I couldn't help myself. "You're wrong about that, Melanie. I cater to her every chance I get." "You do?" she said sharply. "In that case, you'd better keep her away from Frank." And with those words, she stormed away. I smiled to myself. Everything was going exactly as I'd hoped. At that moment, I noticed Penny carrying a tray of food. I knew she was on the entertainment committee, but I didn't know if she was well enough to come tonight. I ran over and grabbed her hand. She blushed when she saw me. "I'm so glad you're feeling better," I told her. "You should have called me and let me know you were feeling well enough to come tonight." "I guess I wasn't sure until the last minute, Michael. Besides, I figured you'd be here with your new girlfriend and I didn't want to bother you." At that moment, Rhiannon walked by, laughing and talking to one of my teammates. "And I see I was right," Penny continued, frowning. She was about to move on, but I grabbed her arm again. "Wait, Penny. We need to talk about our next match." She hesitated for a moment, then obviously made a decision. "Regarding that, Michael, things have gotten really busy for me lately, and, well, I've decided to drop the mixtape and focus on the women's team." I was shocked. "You can't do that, Penny," I blurted out. "You're my partner. Who am I going to find to play?" Penny glanced over my shoulder, and when I looked back, I saw Rhiannon standing there. "You'll find someone, Michael," Penny said. "Now please let me go. I need to carry this food." When I let go of her hand, she rushed away. Rhiannon took my hand and walked with me to a vacant table. When we sat down, she leaned over and whispered, "Just so you know, this girl loves you." "What? No, that's crazy. She's my tennis partner. She was in Melanie's Pilates class." "And if I'm not mistaken," Rhiannon continued, ignoring me, "you have a little crush on her, too." "No," I objected. "That's not true. She's just a good friend." "Maybe," she said skeptically. "Anyway, I think we've done all we can for tonight, so let's get out of here." Back at my house, I asked Rhiannon to tell me about what had happened with Melanie and Frank. She smiled smugly. I walked over to where they had arranged the food and sampled it, complimenting her. Melanie clearly didn't appreciate my presence but couldn't say anything. I then told her how much I liked her outfit, and she was compelled to return the compliment. This gave me the opportunity to tell her where I bought mine. I could see that she recognized the garment and realized how much it must have cost. She didn't say anything, but her eyes almost turned green with envy. "That sounds like Melanie," I said. "She's definitely fashion-conscious and prides herself on her taste in clothes." "It was at that moment," Rhiannon continued, "that one of the ladies asked Melanie to help in the kitchen, and although she didn't want to, she had to leave me alone with Frank. When she left, I reached out and sampled more from their dish." Saying this, Rhiannon reproduced what she was doing. She bent at the waist and her blouse fell away, exposing lush breasts that were barely contained by a thin bra. Then she made a small movement with her finger, slipped it into her mouth, and, all the while looking at me, sucked on it so sweetly that I felt hot. She straightened up and smiled at me, clearly realizing the impact she was having. Barely having gotten Frank's attention, I began flirting with him in earnest. I asked him if he played soccer, and that gave him a chance to show off a bit. While he was doing this, I reached out and stroked his chest. I commented on how much bigger he was than you and said I liked big men. She grinned. I thought he was going to fall over right there at the table. "Wow," I said. "No wonder Melanie was so hostile." "I'm doing the best I can," she said with obvious false modesty. "I can't believe Frank believed you were hitting on him," I added. She laughed out loud. "Guys like Frank are so self-assured that it never occurs to them to question a woman's interest in them. The ironic thing is that they are usually the worst lovers." I had to smile at that. If what Rhiannon said was true, it would serve Melanie well. I handed her the envelope. "Do you think we're ready for the next stage?" I asked her. "Definitely. The dance at your club will be perfect for what we have planned." Then she turned and headed for the front door. "What, no attempt at seduction tonight?" I asked her with a smile. She smiled over her shoulder at me. "I hadn't thought about it." After she left, I opened a can of beer and sat down to think about what was going on. On the one hand, I was really pleased with how well the honey trap was working. Even though Melanie didn't want me anymore, I knew she was less than pleased with how quickly I'd found someone to replace her, and even more upset that her replacement was so much hotter than she ever could be. It was all really encouraging, but I couldn't help but feel upset about Penny's situation. Could Rhiannon be right? I wondered. Could I really have feelings for Penny? I'd liked her from the first time Melanie had introduced us. Plus, I found her attractive, slim, athletic, and graceful, with a charming and friendly personality. But because of Melanie, I had always tried to keep our relationship strictly friendly as a tennis partnership, and I was sure Penny wanted the same, especially when she was going through the loss of her husband. I thought about what Rhiannon had said about Penny. It couldn't be true, could it? If Penny was interested in me, why was she avoiding me like the plague? And why does it bother me so much? For that matter, why had I repeatedly turned down the sexiest woman I'd probably ever met in my life? Could my feelings for Penny be part of it? Eventually, I gave up and went to bed. I didn't know the answers to my questions, and even if I did, I still didn't know what to do with them. I decided it was best for me to keep moving forward, focusing on the plan I had initiated. The annual spring dance at the club was a popular event that always drew a lot of people. The ladies used the dance as an excuse to come out in their new clothes, and the men reluctantly donned their sport jackets. Some even wore ties. I was counting on Frank and Melanie showing up. I had given Rhiannon a hint of what to expect, and I was curious to see what she would wear for the culmination of our plan tonight. So I was surprised and disappointed to see her get out of the car in jeans and a t-shirt. Admittedly, they were the tightest jeans I'd ever seen on a woman, and the t-shirt was obscenely tight around her braless breasts. But still, I was expecting something different. My face must have given me away because she stroked it as she slid past me. "You didn't think I'd risk wrinkling my dress on the road, did you? Just let me use my bedroom for a while, and then I'll be ready to go." I had already put on my sports jacket and pants, so I impatiently hung around the office while she got dressed. Damn, I grinned to myself. We're almost like an old married couple. A few minutes later, her voice came to me. Michael, can't you come over here? I need your help. She turned to face me. Will it do? She asked with a slight smile. I couldn't help it. I took a step towards her, but she stopped me with a smile and a raised hand. No, not now. I can't let you ruin everything. So now that I see your approval, get out of here and let me put on my dress. I think I staggered back to my den. A few minutes later, she came out. This time, she was wearing a strapless dress, the same cream color as the trim of her underwear. The color of it matched her hair perfectly. As she walked across the floor, I realized that the dress must have been tailored because the fabric seemed to flow down her limbs like water. With each step, I could clearly see the outline of her thighs, and when she turned, her buttocks clearly tensed. The slit in the side of her dress reached just below the top of her stocking, and when she stood up properly, her perfect leg was exposed with devastating effect. And my blood pressure wasn't helped at all by the fact that I knew exactly what she was wearing under the dress. I swallowed hard. I think you're going to cause heart attacks tonight, I told her, not kidding. She smiled silently at me and held out her hand so I could walk her to the door. The club had cleared out the patio and hung paper lanterns for the dance. It was a little silly, but I found myself enjoying the effect of the soft lights and loud music. Rhiannon slid into my arms to dance, and I wasn't surprised to find that she was a much better dancer than I was. As we moved together, she rested her head on my shoulder, and in that moment I decided I didn't care that she was a work in progress. I was just enjoying the feel of her body against mine and the pleasure of her company. She lifted her head and moved far enough away to look at me. You know, this country life isn't so bad. A girl could get used to it. Before I could answer, she tensed up. Uh-oh, places to stand. I turned just in time to see Frank Calhoun heading our way, dragging and obviously resisting Melanie behind him. Hello, Rhiannon. Hello, Michael, he thundered. I'm so glad you decided to join us tonight. How about we switch partners for a dance or two? When I agreed, he pulled Rhiannon away from me, leaving a clearly uncomfortable Melanie standing beside me. I held out my hand to her. Would you like to dance for old time's sake? She reluctantly agreed, and when a new song came on, I started dancing with her. It was an interesting experience. I loved this woman and had been married to her for 10 years. However, after what happened, all that was left in me was a strong desire to make her feel what she had done to me. So was our marriage really that bad? I asked. She sighed. No, Michael, it wasn't at all. We had good years and glorious times. But then things slipped into a rut, and after a while I just didn't feel particularly enthusiastic about our relationship anymore. When Frank came along and so obviously let me know how much he wanted me, I just got carried away with the whole thing. I really fell in love, Michael. I fell in love just like I did back in college. She looked at me. I didn't mean to hurt you, Michael, but I had to do what was right for me. Do you understand? I understand, I said bitterly. You decided to change your shoes on the fly. That's not what I meant, she said defensively. It's all right, I said. I did the same thing. She shuddered, remembering who I was now dating, and I felt some satisfaction. If it was done right later, it would only get better. I looked up and saw Frank and Rhiannon walking toward us hand in hand. There's your girl, Michael, Frank said with a slight smirk. Good night. Then he walked away, and Melanie rushed after him. Rhiannon and I resumed dancing. How did it go? I whispered in her ear. I could almost hear the smirk in her voice. The hook is secure, she said. He's convinced I'm in love with him. He's going to apologize to Melanie, and we're going to meet at the club after everyone leaves. I'm just a little nervous about that part. The timing has to be perfect, I tell her. Just leave it to me. Women know everything about these things. Then she licked my ear, and I flinched. As the evening ended, I noticed that the crowd was starting to thin out pretty quickly. I guess I must have been looking around because Rhiannon noticed it. I'm sorry, Michael, she said, but I don't think Penny came over tonight. Am I that transparent? I asked. Like glass, she replied with a slight smile. When we got back to my place, I reached into my pocket and handed Rhiannon another envelope. I may not have a chance to give this to you later, I said, and I want to make sure you're okay." She accepted it almost reluctantly, I noticed. She looked at me for a moment, and then her face changed. The sexy goddess had disappeared somewhere, leaving a real, albeit beautiful woman. "This was the most unusual assignment I've ever had," she said, "and you're unlike any client I've ever had. It's been a little frustrating at times," I blushed, "but I've enjoyed the whole thing immensely." I took both her hands in mine. Intent on revenge, I knew I needed someone with remarkable qualities, I replied. "But I never expected to find someone like you, and I'll never forget you." I suddenly stepped forward and kissed her on the lips. She held the kiss for a few seconds and then pulled back abruptly. She blinked rapidly a few times and hurriedly said, "Don't smudge my lipstick." Then she glanced at the jewel-encrusted watch on her wrist and added, "It's almost time. We have to go. Give me exactly 30 minutes. With those words, she walked out the door, got into her car, and drove away. I stood there for a minute and then made my decision. Rhiannon and I hadn't talked about it, and I hoped I wouldn't completely screw up, but I had to take this risk. I pulled out my cell phone. She must have recognized my number. "Michael, why are you calling at this hour?" "Penny, I'm about to ask you for the biggest favor of my life. Please, please, please don't ask any questions. Just meet me at the club in 30 minutes. "What's going on, Michael? What is this all about?" "Please, Penny," I begged. "I don't have time to explain. Please believe me. Just come back in 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I have to go." I hung up. Heading towards the clubhouse, I wondered if she would come. The chance was slim, but I figured it was the only chance I had. When I got to the parking lot, there were 2 cars parked there. I pulled out my cell phone again and made another call. "Frank?" Melanie's angry voice came over the phone. "Where are you?" "It's not Frank," I said. "It's Michael." "Michael, what do you want? And why are you calling so late?" she demanded. "I'm calling because I know where Frank is. He's with Rhiannon." "What?" she screamed. "Where are they?" "Listen," I said. "Just find me at the club as soon as possible." Then I hung up the phone. Frank's house was a few blocks away from the clubhouse, but she must have been running because I soon spotted her running through someone's backyard. I intercepted her before she got to the clubhouse. "Where is he?" she raged. "Quiet," I commanded, grabbing her wrist. "You have to be quiet so we can catch them." I led her to the door to the club, which was unlocked, and we tiptoed across the threshold. As we entered the living room, we heard the rustle and rustle of clothes. In the dim light coming through the windows, I saw Melanie's eyes widen. I quickly clamped a hand over her mouth to keep the noise away, then pointed to the light switch on the wall. She nodded understandingly, and we tiptoed over to it. I flicked the switch, and the room was instantly flooded with light. With a startled cry, Frank tried to jump up, but tangled in his pants, which were pulled down to his knees, he tripped and fell to the floor. He jumped to his feet again, desperately pulling up his pants. Behind him, Rhiannon jumped up from where she had been lying on the couch. Her dress had been thrown over the back of the couch, and as she stood up, she pulled her bra over her bare breasts. She was standing there, dressed only in her outrageous underwear, and there could be no doubt in anyone's mind as to what was going on. I had to restrain Melanie while she screamed at Frank, "You bastard! How could you do this to me? We were supposed to be married!" Rhiannon clung to Frank's arm, shrinking behind his back in the face of Melanie's anger. Now that he was wearing pants, Frank's confidence returned. He looked at me boldly, then turned to Rhiannon and asked her, "What do you want now, baby?" "Oh, Frank," she answered in a little girl's voice, "I just want to be with you." As she clung tightly to him, he put his arms around her in a protective gesture, then turned to face us. Despite Melanie's distress, his first words were addressed to me. "Well, Michael, it looks like you've lost your second woman, too." I didn't say a word, but Melanie cried out, "What about us, Frank? What about us?" The big man turned to her. "Look, Melanie, we were fine for a while, but it would never have lasted too long. Now I've found someone better, and I'm going to devote all my time to her." He looked back at Rhiannon and then turned to Melanie. "You can't blame a guy for wanting to change his shoes, can you?" Hearing those words, even in her pain and anger, Melanie couldn't help but look at me guiltily. Rhiannon turned and deftly put on her dress. Then she turned and put her arms around Frank's neck. He leaned over and kissed her. "Come on, baby. Let's get out of here," he said, pulling her toward the door. "Go ahead, Frank," she said. "I have something to tell Michael. Besides, I don't want to leave my car here. Look, let's meet at this bar over here." She reached into her purse, pulled out a piece of paper, and hurriedly wrote down the address. "I'll be right behind you, honey," she added, stroking the front of his pants and kissing him passionately. He looked at her doubtfully. "Are you sure you'll be all right?" he asked. "I'm sure, darling. Michael won't hurt me. He's not that kind of guy." "Yeah," Frank grinned. "I think you're right." With those words, he headed for the door and we heard him drive away. While our attention was on Frank, Melanie managed to escape my grasp. She screamed, "Bitch!" and lunged at Rhiannon with claws extended. Instead of flinching, Rhiannon calmly stood her ground. As Melanie sprang toward her, Rhiannon quickly stepped to the side, grabbed Melanie's outstretched hand, and smoothly twisted it behind her back. She winked at me. I knew self-defense lessons would come in handy. When Melanie continued to resist, Rhiannon told her sharply, "If you don't calm down, I'll be forced to dislocate your shoulder." Melanie stopped resisting, and Rhiannon pushed her away, turning her to face her. "Listen, Melanie, there's something you should know," she said. "I don't give a damn about your Neanderthal ex-fiancé, and I have absolutely no intention of joining him at the bar he's headed to." Melanie was stunned. But why? Why did I seduce him? Because that's my profession. I'm a paid escort. I've been with dozens of guys like Frank. They all think they're God's gift to women, and they're always looking for the next piece of ass. Do you think he loved you? The only thing he really loved was the opportunity to finally beat Michael at something. I believe he loved having you, but he loved having Michael even more. So Michael hired me to make Frank pay and at the same time show you what it feels like to be cheated on. It hurts, doesn't it? After that, Melanie screamed and then lunged at me. But before I could react, a figure flashed in front of me and knocked her down. She stretched awkwardly on the floor, and Penny stood over her, fists clenched. "You deserve it, Melanie. After what you did to Michael, you deserve so much more." Melanie lay silently sobbing. It seemed to me that her feelings were hurt more than her body. Penny turned to face me, and I could see tears streaming down her face. "Was it really true?" she asked me. "Is she really not your girlfriend?" "No," I told her solemnly. "She was my partner in the honey trap we set for Frank and Melanie, but nothing more." "But she's so beautiful," Penny objected. "I could never compete with someone like her." Rhiannon walked over and put her hands on Penny's shoulders. "Silly girl, I never stood a chance. He only had eyes for you." Penny looked at me again. "You mean you never even?" Rhiannon stepped in again. "No, Penny, he never did. There was no way I could have distracted him from you long enough for him to touch me, and I was, believe me, giving him that opportunity." Penny didn't say anything, but she looked at me with shining eyes. Rhiannon grinned at both of us. "I think it's time for me to get out of here. I've had tougher assignments than this, but this one is tiring me out for some reason." At that moment, Melanie got up from the floor. "What about me? Where am I supposed to go? I can't go back to Frank's house, not after what happened." Penny looked at her thoughtfully. "I don't know what you'll do tomorrow, but you can sleep at my house tonight. I'll go with Michael." With those words, she kissed me hard. I took her hand and decided never to let go again. But something was bothering me, so I turned to Rhiannon again. "What about Frank? Where did you send him anyway?" She laughed. "That's the address of a gay bar I know. I wonder how long he'll sit there before he realizes I'm not coming." Then the smile on her face faded, and she looked at me intently. "Good luck, Michael. You're a special man, and I won't forget you." She leaned toward me and kissed me gently. I felt Penny squeeze my hand even tighter. Then Rhiannon turned to Penny, and her face took on a hard expression. "Treat him right, understand? If I ever hear that you didn't, I'll be back, and this time I won't take no for an answer." The fierce expression left her face, replaced by a look that I later realized was sadness. She reached out and patted my cheek. "But I don't think I'll be so lucky." Then she reached into her purse and slipped something into my hand. "Goodbye," she said, and then she turned and walked out the door, swaying her hips magnificently. I looked at my hand. There were 4 unopened envelopes in it,